My girlfriend was still seeing her ex and got pregnant. I broke up with her because she wanted to keep the baby. I'm a 30-year-old male. My ex-girlfriend, whom I'm about to tell you about, is 28. We met a little over 3 years ago at a small music event in the city. We both lived in the US, far from our families, so perhaps we quickly found common ground and became each other's support system in a foreign land. When we first met, I was captivated by her radiant smile and warm personality. She was intelligent, funny, and had a kind heart, or at least that's what I believed. We officially started dating after a few weeks of getting to know each other. Our relationship progressed naturally and sweetly. The first few months were beautiful. We explored the city together, cooked in my small kitchen, and spent weekends watching movies or having picnics in the park near our place. I vividly remember the first time she met my mother via video call. My mother lives in another state, but was eager to meet her son's girlfriend. I was a little nervous. You know, mothers of sons are often quite critical, but contrary to my fears, from the very first conversation, my mother and she adored each other. After the call, my mother jokingly said, "She's so lovely, I approve. Make sure you hold on to her." Hearing that, I felt incredibly warm and happy. Having my family's support made me appreciate this relationship even more. Over time, our feelings deepened. We moved in together after a little over a year of dating. Her relationship with my family was also very good. My family in Vietnam consists only of my mother. My father passed away when I was young, and my mother had lived with me in the US for a short time before returning to Vietnam. Now she visits me once a year during the holidays. My girlfriend always thoughtfully prepared gifts for my mother every time she visited and regularly called to check on her. My mother loved her very much and considered her a future daughter-in-law. Honestly, there were times when I felt she was closer to my mother than I was. The two most important women in my life were in harmony and loved each other, and I used to think how lucky I was. We made so many plans for the future. We both had stable jobs. I'm a software developer, she's a freelance graphic designer. We talked about getting married after saving enough money to buy a small house in the suburbs, with a yard for our future children to run around in. Yes, we used to fantasize about having 2 children, a boy and a girl. We even discussed what to name them, how to raise them, and which schools to send them to. She used to tease that our daughter would resemble me and our son would resemble her, so it would be fair. Thinking back on those things, my heart aches. We were so close to that simple happiness, a small family filled with love. I remember vividly the last time my mother came to visit us. It was Christmas last year. She stayed at my place for about 3 weeks, and during that time the house was filled with laughter. My mother and she cooked Vietnamese dishes together, and the 3 of us gathered around the cozy dining table. Many nights, they confided in each other for hours like mother and daughter. My mother held her hand, her eyes full of love, while she leaned her head on my mother's shoulder, telling her all sorts of stories. Sometimes I caught sight of that scene and my nose would tingle with emotion. In those moments, I thought to myself, I'm definitely going to marry this girl. In fact, I had planned to propose to her this summer. I even secretly picked out and bought the engagement ring a few months ago. I hid it in a secret drawer in the bedroom, planning to surprise her during our trip to California in June. I imagined myself kneeling under the sunset on a California beach, where we first said, "I love you," and giving her the ring. I thought she would definitely cry with emotion and say yes. I was so excited and looking forward to that day. Everything seemed to be set for a happy ending. But life doesn't always go as planned. An unexpected event struck and swept away all the plans, all the happy dreams I cherished. It was like a storm that destroyed the house I thought I had built so solidly on a foundation of trust. Painfully, that storm originated from the very woman I loved most. The harsh truth revealed. Things started to unravel just a few months after my mother returned home. It was around February of this year. I'm not sure exactly when I first sensed something was wrong, but perhaps my intuition was speaking. The girlfriend I had completely trusted suddenly became different. At first, it was just small signs that were easy to ignore. She would sometimes startle when I entered the room, quickly hiding her phone as if afraid I would see something. Or sometimes while having dinner with me, she would be distracted, her eyes looking distant and unfocused, and only when I asked would she startle. "Huh? What did you say?" Then there were nights I would wake up and find the bed empty. I would find her sitting on the living room sofa in the dark, the phone screen casting a faint blue light on her face. Seeing me, she would flinch like someone who had just done something wrong. But when I worriedly asked, she would just make excuses. I couldn't sleep, so I got up to browse online for a bit. You go back to sleep. I didn't suspect, or rather, I didn't want to suspect. I told myself that maybe she was stressed about work or had something she didn't want to tell me yet. To be honest, I had never been bothered by her ex-boyfriend before. I knew that before me. She had a serious relationship that lasted 5 years during college. They broke up about a year before she met me, and the reason for the breakup, as she told me, was that he moved to another state for work and the long-distance relationship didn't work out. When we first started dating, I felt a little twinge of jealousy when I heard about her long-term past relationship, but since she was upfront about it and seemed to have moved on, I didn't think much of it. She had assured me, "It's really over between me and him. We rarely contact each other, maybe just occasionally exchange greetings via text." I also made it clear to him that I have a boyfriend. Hearing that, I was very reassured. I never wanted to be the kind of man who controls and forbids his girlfriend from keeping in touch with her ex or other male friends. I respected her personal space and trusted her completely. During our more than 2 years of dating, she never gave me any reason to be jealous or suspicious. She always came home on time, always let me know if she was going somewhere with friends. She also introduced me to most of her friends. In general, I believe she was transparent and sincere. Therefore, when the strange signs started to appear, I kept extinguishing my bad feelings with the excuse, "She loves me. She would never betray me. She's probably just tired or something." Unfortunately, that blind trust eventually led to a painful fall. I remember the day my world crumbled very clearly. It was a Friday evening. I got off work early, excited to cook a celebratory dinner for our 3rd anniversary. Even though it wasn't the actual date, we were both free on the weekend. I stopped by the store and bought 2 nice steaks, a bottle of red wine she liked, and a bouquet of bright yellow tulips, her favorite flowers, as a surprise. I couldn't wait to see her surprised and happy face. However, as soon as I got home, a strange sight met my eyes. She was sitting slumped on the sofa, her head bowed, her hands clasped tightly together as if she was extremely worried. Hearing me open the door, she looked up and I froze when I saw how bad she looked. Her eyes were red and puffy as if she had been crying, her face pale and lifeless. The dining table wasn't prepared for anything romantic at all, just a few crumpled tissues scattered about, and the pregnancy test stick lying carelessly next to the box. My heart sank. A thought flashed through my mind. Is she pregnant? So that test, what's the result? Positive. I hurriedly put down the grocery bag, walked quickly to the table, and picked up the pregnancy test. 2 dark pink lines were clearly visible. It was a positive pregnancy test. Before I could process my emotions, she rushed over, tears streaming down her face. She opened her mouth, her voice trembling. I'm sorry. I was going to tell you a few days ago." At that moment, a whirlwind of emotions swirled within me. Surprise, confusion, and even a glimmer of hope. My first reaction, "It sounds unbelievable," was a fleeting joy. Yes, for a few brief seconds, I joyfully thought, "Are we having a baby?" Although we're not married yet, this baby, could it be a surprising but wonderful gift? She's pregnant. I'm going to be a father. The thought made my heart race, both shocked and thrilled. I looked at her stunned, my mouth stammering. Finally, I managed to utter, "You're pregnant? Really?" She covered her face and sobbed. Her panicked demeanor extinguished the joy that had just sparked within me, replaced by a vague unease. Why was she so distraught at the news of her pregnancy? People usually cry tears of joy when they find out they're pregnant, especially with a loved one by their side, right? But these tears were full of despair. Something was very wrong here. I approached her, gently taking her hand, even though my stomach was in knots. "Calm down. Let's sit down and talk, okay?" I led her back to the sofa and knelt in front of her so I could look her in the eyes. I tried to keep my voice as calm as possible. "Tell me. It's okay. We'll figure it out together. How long have you been pregnant? Why are you so scared? I'm here. I'll be with you." I hadn't finished my sentence when she shook her head frantically, tears falling like rain. No, you don't understand." She sobbed, her voice full of despair. My heart tightened. My intuition was screaming that something terrible was behind this. A horrific thought flashed through my mind, making me gasp. I stammered, my throat dry. What? What do you mean? Why don't I understand? I'm the father of the baby. I'm responsible, She suddenly looked up, trying to interrupt me. No, don't say any more. Then she looked at me through her tears, her lips trembling. Her voice seemed to catch in her throat, each word drenched in extreme pain. You're not the father. You're not. Just that much. Those few short words were like a knife piercing my heart. I dropped her hand, a coldness running down my spine. I stared at her, my mind numb. The room fell into a deathly silence, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock and her choked sobs. There are moments that people remember forever, like a deep scar in their memory. For me, that moment was when I heard the sentence, "You're not the father." My heart felt like it was being crushed. I wanted to say something, to scream, but my throat was stiff, unable to utter a word. A feeling both hot and cold spread through my body, a mixture of rage, numbness, and despair. I jumped up, staggering back as if I had been struck. She also stood up in panic, trying to reach out to me, but I raised my hand to stop her, not letting her near. My voice came out hoarse, almost inaudible. Why? Why is it like this? You explain. She sobbed, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry. I didn't know things would turn out like this. I almost roared. What did you do? Anger began to boil in my veins, overriding the pain. That baby, whose is it? She froze, her eyes full of fear. Then she exhaled as if giving up, unable to hide it anymore. Her voice was just a whisper. His, my ex-boyfriend's. My already fractured heart shattered completely. My ears were ringing. It took me a few seconds to be sure I hadn't misheard. Ex-boyfriend. Those words echoed in my head. She just said the baby was her ex-boyfriend's. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath to gather the last of my composure, but it was completely useless. My whole body trembled. When I opened my eyes, everything in front of me seemed to blur in a mixture of rage and pain. Ex-boyfriend? You're saying you slept with him? I hissed through gritted teeth, almost screaming. She knelt down on the floor, her hands clasped in front of her chest, as if pleading. Please, forgive me. I didn't mean to betray you. It was just a mistake. I laughed bitterly, feeling tears welling up. The wounded pride made me utter bitter words. Mistake? Sleeping with your ex-boyfriend and calling it a mistake? How long have you two been seeing each other? She shook her head frantically, tears streaming down her face. Just that one time. I swear, just that one time. That day, I was weak and we drank too much. It happened unintentionally. Her voice trailed off in despair. I laughed like a madman. Just once? Unintentionally? And now you're pregnant with his child? Funny. Do you think I'd believe that? Part of me wanted to believe her, that it was just a one-time mistake in a drunken stupor, because that sounded less bad than her secretly seeing him multiple times. But whether once or many times, the terrible truth remained unchanged. She had betrayed me. She had slept with another man and was carrying his child. I staggered back, shaking my head, trying to accept the harsh reality unfolding before me. The room, which had been warm just moments ago, now seemed to be spinning. The bouquet of tulips I brought home lay scattered on the floor, the wine bottle rolled under the chair, the planned romantic dinner had gone up in smoke. It was all like a cruel joke. My heart ached terribly. It felt like the person I loved had just died. Not physically, but the person I knew was gone. Trust, love, hope, all dead following the betrayal. She saw my silence, perhaps even more frightened by my expression. She edged closer, her voice pleading. I know I was wrong. I regret it so much. I was going to tell you, but I was scared. I was scared of losing you. I love you, I truly love you. I never wanted to hurt you. What happened with him was just a moment of weakness. I don't have any feelings for him anymore. Hearing that, I only felt bitterness. If she truly loved me, how could she be so weak as to betray me like that? But I didn't bother asking that anymore. All words of love now felt empty. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, with an abyss of despair below. She continued to cry and speak in pain. When I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I thought about an abortion, but I couldn't do it. I'm sorry. I understand if you can't forgive me. I just want you to know that I truly love you. If you leave me, I'll accept it. But this baby, it's innocent. I will keep it. At this point, my heart broke completely. She chose to keep the baby, the result of her betrayal, even if it meant losing me. The moment I heard her say, "I will keep it," I knew it was all over between us. Because if she had made that decision, how could I stay with her? Seeing the woman I love carrying another man's child every day, the man she cheated on me with, would kill me. I looked at the girl I once thought would be my wife, the mother of my children, now kneeling and crying in front of me. Part of me wanted to scream, to smash something. But another part felt only empty and incredibly tired. What did I do wrong to deserve this shock? I loved wholeheartedly. I trusted completely. What was my fault? Yet what I received in return was a knife in the back. I don't remember how long I stood motionless. It was probably only a few tens of seconds, but it felt like an eternity. She continued to sob, her eyes pleading but also helpless. Perhaps she herself understood that there was nothing left to salvage. Finally, I took a deep breath, swallowed hard, and said in an icy voice, "We're over. Pack your things." She looked up at me, stunned as if she couldn't believe her ears even though she knew it was coming. "Please don't." She reached out to me as if to hold on. I stepped back, avoiding her touch. Anger flared up again, helping me be more decisive. "Don't touch me. You lied to me. You betrayed my trust. How dare you ask me to stay? And that baby, I don't care what you do, but don't expect me to be there to take care of the consequences you and he caused." Cruel words tumbled out, each word like a knife cut. I turned away, no longer looking at the pain on her face. I couldn't feel any sympathy or pity at this point. I was in too much pain. She collapsed on the floor, covering her face and sobbing. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." She just kept repeating. I felt my eyes burning too. I wanted to maintain a cold demeanor, but tears were already falling. Unable to stay a second longer, I turned and rushed out the door. "When you're done packing, get out of here. I don't want to see you again." I dropped one last sentence, then opened the door and hurried out, slamming it shut behind me. I ran like a madman down the stairs. We lived on the second floor of the apartment complex, out to the parking lot. Getting into the car, I punched the steering wheel. It stung, but that pain was nothing compared to the wrenching in my chest. I buried my head in the steering wheel and burst into tears. I had tried to hold back in front of her, but now, alone, I couldn't bear it anymore. Heartbreaking sobs escaped, echoing in the confined space of the car. I pounded on the steering wheel, the car horn blaring loudly in the quiet night. I didn't care about anything anymore. My world had completely collapsed. I don't know how long I sat there crying. 5 minutes? 15 minutes? Or an hour? I just remember the feeling of exhaustion, of crying until I had no more tears. Finally, with the little reason I had left, I started the engine and drove out of the parking lot. I couldn't be near that apartment right now, where she, or rather now my ex-girlfriend, was probably still packing. I didn't want to say anything more to her tonight. Between us, everything had been said. I needed space to breathe and understand what the hell had just happened to my life. The wheels rolled aimlessly on the road. I drove unconsciously, without a destination, my mind in turmoil. Happy memories with her flooded back like a slow-motion film. Her smile, her hugs, her promises for the future. Now it was all a lie. I wondered if the girl I had loved for the past 3 years really existed, or was it just a figment of my imagination? Why could someone who had been so gentle and sincere with me stab me like that? What did I do to deserve this? I kept questioning myself, but there were no answers. In my distraught state, I suddenly remembered that I needed a place to stay for the night. I couldn't sleep in the car, and I couldn't go back to that apartment. I called Daniel, a colleague and close friend who played basketball with me. When Daniel answered, my voice was hoarse. "Are you home? Can I crash at your place tonight?" "I'll explain later." Probably hearing the strangeness in my voice, Daniel agreed immediately. "Yeah, come over, whatever it is, just come." I drove to Daniel's house, barely remembering the route. As soon as Daniel opened the door and saw my disheveled appearance, he didn't ask many questions, just patted my shoulder and pulled me inside, closing the door. I tried to appear calm, but when Daniel gently asked, "What's wrong, man?" I burst into tears again. I hated how pathetically weak I was, but I couldn't hold back at that moment. Daniel awkwardly hugged me, patting my back and comforting me like a child. I was truly grateful that at least I wasn't alone right now. When I calmed down a bit, I haltingly told Daniel everything. He was speechless, occasionally cursing. "Holy shit. I can't believe it. Or what the hell was she thinking? Daniel's anger on my behalf somehow made me feel like I wasn't alone in this resentment. As for me, strangely, I felt more empty than angry at this point. When it first happened, I was both furious and in excruciating pain. But just a few hours later, I was so emotionally drained that I didn't have the energy to be angry anymore. Only a vast sadness enveloped me. I sat listlessly on Daniel's sofa, staring blankly at the floor. Daniel also sat silently beside me, probably not knowing what to say. After a while, he patted my shoulder and told me, "Okay, you can sleep on the couch tonight. If you need anything, just call me." I nodded, grateful for his presence, but unable to speak. That night, lying on the unfamiliar sofa, I barely slept. My tears had dried up, leaving only an exhausted body. Every time I closed my eyes, her image would appear, her tear-stained face uttering those cruel words. I had to sit up and pace around to clear my mind of the haunting images. In the bathroom mirror, I saw my bloodshot eyes, messy hair, and haggard face like someone seriously ill. I didn't recognize myself. All night, I paced back and forth, then sat holding my head, trying to banish the terrifying thoughts. I told myself it was just a nightmare, that everything would be okay when I woke up in the morning. But the truth was too harsh. This wasn't a dream. She had really betrayed me, and we had broken up. The next morning, as dawn broke, perhaps from exhaustion, I managed to doze off for a bit. Daniel had already left for his morning shift, leaving me a note telling me to stay and rest. Luckily, it was Saturday, so I didn't have to go to work. If I had to go to work in this condition, I wouldn't have been able to handle it. I picked up my phone and saw dozens of missed calls and messages from her. My heart ached as I watched her name flashing on the screen. I wasn't ready to hear or read anything from her. I turned off my phone, temporarily cutting off all contact, at least until I was calm enough to face everything. I spent the rest of the morning sitting in stunned silence. Now, the shock had robbed me of even the ability to cry or get angry. I was just numb like a soulless being. The future I had longed for was shattered. The girl I loved, trusted, considered my future wife, was no longer the person I thought she was. She had betrayed me and was carrying another man's child. We had broken up. I repeated in my head, "She and I are over." But it was hard to accept it as reality. Everything happened so fast, so suddenly. Just yesterday, I thought I was the happiest man in the world, and yet today she had become the stranger who caused me the most pain. I knew I couldn't hide forever. Sooner or later, I would have to return to my apartment and face reality, her absence and the remnants of our broken relationship. That afternoon, I thanked Daniel and drove home. Standing beneath the apartment building, I looked up at the window of the apartment that used to be filled with our laughter, now silent and unfamiliar. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage, and slowly climbed the stairs. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open. The apartment was silent, with only the smell of stale food from last night and the faint lingering scent of her. The living room was empty. The mess from last night had been cleared away. The table was wiped clean. The bouquet of yellow tulips was no longer on the floor. Perhaps she had picked them up and put them back in the vase. I saw them neatly placed on the table, like her last trace. The pregnancy test was also gone. On the table were only her house keys, meaning she was gone, probably left early in the morning. Looking around, a dull ache welled up as I saw the empty spaces on the bookshelf, where her small potted plants used to be, now bare. The key hook no longer held her car keys with the teddy bear keychain. In the bedroom, the closet doors were wide open. Her clothes were almost all gone, leaving only a few empty hangers. The vanity table was unusually tidy, lacking her cosmetics and favorite perfume bottle. The sight both relieved me, because I didn't have to see her, and caused me immense pain. She had truly left my life. I slumped onto the edge of the bed, exhausted. My eyes accidentally landed on the corner of the cupboard, where I had hidden the engagement ring. I had almost forgotten about it amidst this nightmare. Suddenly, a wave of resentment and pain surged. I got up, opened the drawer, and pulled out the small ring box. The sparkling platinum ring lay there, as if mocking me. I picked it up, my hands shaking. Just a few weeks ago, I had happily imagined the day I would put it on her finger, and now it was just a meaningless object. I angrily threw the ring box deep into the cupboard. I didn't have the courage to do anything else with it, just throwing it away as if wanting to bury the beautiful dream that had died last night. The apartment became unbearably suffocating. I hastily stuffed a few clothes and personal belongings into my backpack. I decided to go to my mother's house and stay there for a while. My mother currently lives alone in a suburban town about 3 hours' drive from my place. I just wanted to be with my mother right now, the only person in the world I knew for sure would love me unconditionally. On the drive to my mother's house, I thought a lot. What would I say to my mother? My mother loved her very much, considered her a daughter-in-law. If she knew the truth, my mother would be shocked and very sad. Thinking of my mother, my heart ached. She had placed so much hope in our relationship. She often said she wanted to have grandchildren soon, and now it had all gone up in smoke. I felt so sorry for my mother. Several times along the way, tears welled up in my eyes. I had to pull over several times because my vision blurred. I felt both heartbroken, angry, and ashamed. Ashamed of being betrayed so humiliatingly. I felt utterly pathetic. I also tormented myself. Was I so foolish and blind that I didn't realize things sooner? I had trusted her too much, so now I had to pay the price. Arriving at my mother's, I found her watering plants on the porch. Seeing me suddenly appear with a haggard face and puffy eyes, my mother was alarmed. She dropped the watering can and ran to grab my hand. "What's wrong, son? Why did you come back without telling me? Are you sick? You look terrible." As soon as I saw my mother, all my pretended strength crumbled. I bit my lip to try not to cry, but tears welled up. My mother panicked even more. "Son, tell me what's wrong. Is there a problem with your work, or did someone bully you? Or did you two have a fight?" Hearing "you two," my heart ached. My mother had no idea how tragically our "you two" relationship had ended. I sat down on the steps, my throat tight with bitterness. My mother sat down next to me, putting her arm around my shoulder and urging, "Tell me, maybe it's a misunderstanding." I choked out, "Mom, she and I broke up." As soon as I finished speaking, tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. My mother's eyes widened, as if she couldn't believe it. Broke up? How can that be? You two were so good together? Is it just a small argument?" I shook my head, covering my face with my hands. My mother frantically pulled my hands away, looking directly at me. "Why? Tell me what happened. Why break up?" I sobbed. "She betrayed me, Mom. She is pregnant with her ex-boyfriend." Saying those words to my mother, I felt like a complete failure. I hung my head, both ashamed and heartbroken. My mother's face turned pale. She let go of my shoulders, stunned. "Betrayed? Pregnant? I don't understand what you're saying. Your girlfriend is pregnant? But not yours? What do you mean?" I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "She cheated on me. She was seeing her ex-boyfriend and got pregnant. She wants to keep the baby. So, I broke up with her." My mother gasped, putting her hand to her chest as if she couldn't breathe. "Oh my God." Then my mother burst into tears. She pulled me into her arms, and we cried together. I heard my mother sob. "How could things turn out like this, son? My dear son. I didn't expect her to. Oh my God." In my mother's arms, I cried even harder. I was hurt for myself, and even more hurt to see my mother in pain. I sobbed, "I'm sorry, Mom. I couldn't keep the happiness you wanted. I'm so useless." My mother quickly wiped her tears, looking at me sternly. "No, it's not your fault. Don't say that. You didn't do anything wrong. She's the one who's wrong. How dare she hurt my son like this? What's wrong with my son? Oh my God." My mother burst into tears again, stroking my hair and cheeks as if I were a child. Her thin shoulders trembled. Seeing my mother so heartbroken, I blamed myself even more for disappointing her. That afternoon, we sat in the house and talked. I told my mother everything in detail, the previous signs, how I found out, the painful conversation that night, and even about my plan to propose. When I mentioned the engagement ring, my mother cried again. "My son. Poor my son." She blamed blamed herself 10. "It's my fault for not seeing her clearly. I thought she was so good. I was wrong. Why did I encourage it, making you suffer like this?" I had to comfort my mother. "It's not your fault, Mom. You didn't do anything wrong." She hid it so well, I didn't expect it either. I bitterly realized she not only deceived me, but also deceived my mother, who had loved her like a daughter. That evening, my mother cooked me a bowl of hot porridge, forcing me to eat a few spoonfuls to regain my strength. Honestly, I wasn't hungry, my throat felt tight, But my mother kept coaxing me, so I tried to swallow. She also made me a warm glass of milk, telling me to drink it to help me sleep. She was afraid I would completely break down. I was so lucky to have my mother by my side. If I had been alone, I wouldn't have bothered eating or drinking anything. The second night after the breakup, I slept in my childhood bedroom at my mother's house. My mother gave me some mild sleeping pills to help me sleep. I reluctantly took them because I was afraid that without them, I would stay awake all night with a torrent of thoughts. Finally, I managed to sleep for a few hours, fitfully. But every time I woke up, my heart would ache as I became aware of reality. In the morning, upon opening my eyes, the first feeling was still pain and emptiness. The worst part was those mornings. In the moment of waking up, I would still be dazed, then the truth would hit me. I was betrayed. I lost her, and my heart would clench as if being squeezed. For the next few days, I was like a walking corpse. My mother worriedly watched over me constantly, afraid I would do something foolish. Honestly, I had no intention of committing suicide or anything, but I understood why she was worried. I looked like someone who had lost all will to live. I barely ate or drank, didn't bother showering, just lay in bed or sat listlessly for hours staring at the ceiling. My mother had to force me to eat every meal, make me go out for walks in the garden for fresh air, even drag me to the market just so I wouldn't lock myself in my room. Once, I overheard my mother calling my aunt in Vietnam, sobbing, "My son, I raised him this big and still have to worry. He was betrayed in love. It's so sad. I feel so sorry for him, but I don't know how to ease his pain." Hearing my mother say that, my heart ached. I really wanted to appear okay so my mother wouldn't worry so much, but forcing a smile at that time was too difficult for me. Initially, I thought the anger towards her would last. But strangely, just a few days later, the anger subsided, replaced by a deep sadness and terrible emptiness. Perhaps the sadness had overwhelmed the anger. I was sad for losing her, for the shattered happy future, sad for the betrayed trust. At night, I tossed and turned, remembering old memories, my heart aching. I missed her terribly, her smile, her voice, all the familiar habits. I missed how every morning she would wrap her arms around me and whisper a few words before we fully woke up. Those sweet memories now felt like knives stabbing into my heart, because immediately afterward, reason would remind me, she's gone, she deceived me, and is carrying another man's child. I found myself conflicted. Sometimes I hated her immensely, and sometimes I was heartbroken with longing. There were times when I sat cursing her for breaking my heart, but there were also times when I burst into tears because I missed the happy days with her. I didn't understand how my heart could hold both love and hate so intertwined. It was a relentless inner battle. A week passed. I knew I couldn't stay at my mother's forever. I had a job, a life to continue. I had taken a week off work to recover. I couldn't take any longer. Partly, I also didn't want my mother to worry anymore. I decided to return to the city and try to continue my life. My mother initially didn't want me to go. She was afraid I would break down again. But I reassured her that I would be okay. I promised to take care of myself, and if it was too difficult, I would come back immediately. Before I drove away, my mother hugged me for a long time. She pressed into my hand a bag of food she had prepared and a stack of family photos, probably prepared for me to bring along so I wouldn't be lonely. My mother choked up and said, "My son, you have to be strong. Don't think foolishly, okay? Consider it a blessing in disguise. God is testing you. You will get through this. You still have me, remember?" I hugged my mother, unable to speak, just nodding. I told myself I had to try to get back on my feet, otherwise, I would let my mother down. The first day back at work was extremely difficult. I had to force myself to appear normal in front of my colleagues, but sometimes memories of her would flood back, making me choke up. I had to sneak into the restroom several times to breathe and calm myself. The following weeks, my life was a series of gloomy, repetitive days. In the mornings, I would force myself to eat something, go to work, return to the empty apartment in the afternoon, and spend weekends lying around aimlessly. My mother called almost every day to check on me. I always lied and said I was fine, that being busy with work helped me not to think too much. But in reality, every night when I returned to the apartment, loneliness and despair would wash over me. Many times, I would sit on the floor in the living room, staring blankly into space, then explode in sudden fits of anger. I would punch the wall until my hand throbbed, kick the chair over, yell, and curse those who had caused me pain. Yes, sometimes in my rage, I even cursed her ex-boyfriend, even though I had never met him. But after each fit of anger, I would collapse in exhaustion, and sometimes I would even sit